If you ask people in the UK what their favourite TV channel is, they probably couldn't tell you, because they probably watch a bit of McMafia on BBC One, a bit of Bake Off on 4, a bit of Cruising with Jane McDonald on Channel 5, apparently the only thing on Channel 5. People don't have that relationship with their TV station and their TV channels that people have with their radio stations. Because if you said to somebody, what's your favourite radio station, they'd be able to tell you. Because you know and I know that we're there with them all the day. We wake them up, we see them naked in the shower, we lift their mornings, we calm their commutes. We're there through the makeups and the breakups of their lives. We're the soundtrack to what people do. And that analogy and that thought is some of what shaped Absolute Radio's vision over the course of the last 10 years. We want our broadcasters, we want our programs to be the things that stand out. We want that deep, rich relationship, that deep, rich conversation that the best broadcasters have, and the relationship they have with their listeners. So it's that thought of, have you been antagonized by Nick Ferrari? Have you cried at Desert Island Discs when Dawn French told that story about her mum? Have you laughed along when Aggers is on Test Match Special? You've got those memories, you've got those stories. And for me, the vision for what we wanted to make Absolute Radio was a radio station that had that relationship. So over the course of the last 10 years, we've set about building that relationship, about having those conversations, about making those moments that make people want to stay in their car for 5 minutes longer in the morning, that make people want to enter for competitions, that make people cry, that make people think, that entertains and educates, like the old Reithian principles of what radio should be. And that's what Absolute Radio is built on. Our job, our mission, is to engage and entertain reluctant adults. So our audience are reluctant adults. If you don't know what a reluctant adult is, I expect most of you to start nodding anytime soon. So a reluctant adult is someone who used to go to a load of gigs, be a season ticket holder at the football, used to go to comedy nights, and then shit happened. You got mortgages, you got marriage, you got kids, you got careers, yes? And that's what we're there to talk to you about. We want people to live with the radio station and live through the radio station. And we do that through this unique blend of real music and comedy. Our listeners are passionate about the music we play because it soundtracks their lives. It soundtracks it now, and it takes them back to when they did go to loads of festivals. We're their mates, and we have a conversation about our shared passions. So that's what the radio station is built on, and here's how we do it. We have a slogan that real music matters, which is something that runs through the DNA of what the radio station is. We talk a lot about live music, and live music is very important to us in everything that we do. It's about creating landmark programming, and it's about ensuring that commercial radio isn't a homogenized jukebox. We want Absolute Radio to stand out because we do something different. We want a reputation. We want authentic presenters that you can relate to. Whether that's the really credible music presenters or the comedians that we have on the radio station. Radio must live on through on demand. It must be delivered digitally. And also, I want to do at least 1 minute on branded content with you, because there are many content directors who hate the concept of branded content. I'm here to tell you it's the best thing about commercial radio, because if done right, it can allow you to live the dreams that you want to do that your owners don't give you the budget to be able to do. When we started Absolute Radio, we had 1.5 million listeners. We now have 4.7 million listeners across our decade stations and across the main station. This is our record audience, and I think it's the principles that I've just spoken about which have helped to get us to this, but it's about that clear vision. So what is the vision? Well, music, as I say, is really important. It's what we play. It takes up so much of our output. But as a radio station that's talking about real music, that's talking about the people that write the music, that play it live, a live strategy has been key to what we do. We have a 4-tiered live strategy. So whether that's small sessions within the studios, whether that's the curated gigs that we do, everything from Elbow at St Paul's Cathedral to Coldplay at the London Palladium. It's about festival broadcasts, so it's about taking the station out to the Isle of Wight Festival or to Latitude, or for the first time this year, we're going to Nos Alive in Portugal. And it's also about those arena broadcasts, getting the rights to broadcast Muse from the O2. We take our listeners and we put them in the front row. And if you get one of these elements, and if you do it really well, you can make one event last for 2 months. We started on January the 8th talking about a Rag and Bone Man gig that we wanted to do at Birmingham Town Hall. We're still talking about it, but over the course of the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've refreshed that message. So whether it was the announcement, whether it was win tickets on air, win tickets online, are you coming? The actual day of the gig, doing shows from Birmingham. Then it was the on-demand broadcast. Then it was the on-air broadcast. Then it's the video. And actually, you can make one small thing last an entire quarter of a year. So here's a very quick look at what Rag and Bone Man looked like.
We all try. We're all one step from grace. I'm a stranger, but we're all trying to find our way. And at the depth of every darkness, there's a morning. Oh, we all try, we're all one step from grace.
If I give you one piece of advice, hire a bloody brilliant young person to do video for you. That was filmed by a guy called Carl, who's 23 and heads up video for me. He is a stunning talent. He's really ambitious, and he's the guy that's making our live music content look like it should be on the Graham Norton Show. We talked about landmark programming, and commissioning documentaries is really important. I love the fact that Absolute Radio is pretty much the only place on commercial radio, in music radio, that's making documentaries. And this helps us to stand out. This helps us with our reputation. This helps drive money for the radio station. So a few of the ones that we're doing this year: Vinyl Revival, 50 Years of the Isle of Wight Festival, one about how music and football are so symbiotic, a celebration of Dave Grohl, and a really exciting piece about artificial intelligence in music. The likelihood is these will be broadcast out of peak hours, but the great joy is that the peak time shows will tell our listeners that these things are happening. They may listen live, they may listen on demand, but what it's saying to them is, this is a radio station that you want to listen to because it's doing something different. It's doing something that makes you feel proud to be part of that community, that is part of that radio station. The decade stations that we've built over the course of the last 10 years have been so synonymous with Absolute Radio and with our growth. So currently Absolute Radio 90s is across the UK on digital radio, online, on mobile. And it's a really great way of being an entry point to Absolute Radio. Our decade stations are how many people find us because they love the passion of those decades. They love the renaissance, they love the culture, and so Absolute Radio 90s has been such a huge part of what we do. So is this. I was never sure quite how that was going to work when you don't know the context of it. Again, with social, we're all doing social Find the hook to the social. Find the thing that drives the engagement. We can all put loads of stuff up that just doesn't work, and we've spent 10 years trying to perfect what we think works for social. For Absolute Radio, I'm going to be really honest, it's Liam, Noel and Grohl, and that is what we do. So that's why we're spending more time doing great videos of Dave Grohl. But I think, with social, one of the reasons why we've been able to drive the audience is we've worked out what the strategy is. We've worked out what works for the audience, and you do that through trial. Branded content is one of the things that Christian is certainly known for, thanks to our Wix partnership. But again, here's just some of the people that we've been partnering with over the course of the last couple of months. And I think branded content can work for you because it can allow you to do so many things that you didn't think you'd be able to do. The Wix partnership is now in its 6th year, and it's very hard sometimes to make floor tiles sexy. To make drills, drill bits, and 15% off emulsion sexy. But the great thing about the partnership with Wix is the trust that we've had with them, the trust they've placed in us, and the fact that they've said to us, we know what you guys do, and that's what we've bought into. Try and put this into the editorial. And, Christian has sat in so many meetings with us where we've been coming up with ideas, whether that's pantomimes, whether that's crushing sheds, whether that is the one that's we're most famous for, I think. There's Chris Burns, who works for the BBC, once said to Christian and I at an awards ceremony, that bit where you got listeners to impersonate power tools on the radio at 7:30 was one of the greatest. This is a woman who used to produce Desert Island Discs, and yet she still thought people doing power tool impressions was interesting. Work with your clients, work with your agencies. I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do, which has helped us to be able to grow the radio station and send us off on the amazing adventures that we've been on over the course of the last 10 years. This is what it looks like.
Absolute Radio is where real music matters.
Every year, Absolute Radio creates some of the most talked about live music moments with exclusive performances at iconic venues.
Like Noel Gallagher at the Rivoli Ballroom.
Coldplay at the London Palladium.
Liam Gallagher in a working men's club in Bethnal Green.
James Bay
At St James Church.
and Ed Sheeran at Shoreditch Town Hall.
Not to mention countless intimate sessions at our famous One Golden Square Studios. Every summer, Absolute Radio captures all the excitement of the legendary Isle of Wight Festival with a weekend of live music from the main stage, exclusive sessions with big-name interviews.
Absolute Radio is where reluctant adults are and where brands want to be. Whether it's Christian or Richie teaming up with Halifax to host a Stereophonics gig in a listener's living room,
Or the world's best school assembly with Kasabian.
thanks to our friends at Wix.
Every weekday morning, wake up with Christian O'Connell bringing you 7 different playlists in one show. And go home with Dave Berry and the biggest gigs and guests.
In between, enjoy a day of repeat free music with Leona Graham and Andy Bush.
And at weekends, have a laugh with Frank Skinner and Jason Manford.
As well as Rob Beckett, bringing you all the goals with rock and roll football. Absolute Radio's also got a whole family of stations celebrating the best music from the past 5 decades.
We don't get fooled again. Got put a smile upon your face.
You can listen to us wherever you are with the Absolute Radio mobile app.
Listen to all our stations and see who's playing what at any one time.
Get Absolute Radio's podcasts, listen to on-demand content, and enjoy fewer adverts and more music when you create a free Absolute Radio account. Join 2 million fans on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for video content, intimate sessions, interviews, and reviews.
Winner of 5 Radio Academy Awards 2017.
Absolute Radio,
Absolute Radio.
where real music matters.
So it's a radio station built on some core principles with a really clear mission. And at the heart of this for the last 12 years has been a man who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend. He's won more Radio Academy Awards and Archiva Commercial Radio Awards than anybody else. We've worked together really closely for many years, and our ambition was to get The Breakfast Show over 2 million listeners. I'm delighted that in our last Rage Hour survey, the most recent one, not his last one, that we got to 2.1 million listeners. He is somebody who's changed the face of breakfast radio. He is a unique communicator, a unique broadcaster, and a very funny man. Ladies and gentlemen, Christian O'Connell.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Round of applause to Paul Sylvester, everyone. So yeah, this is kind of quite a strange handover. I have been on Absolute Radio for 12 years. When I first started, it was Virgin Radio, and I was there for the transition from Virgin Radio. I don't know what's happened to Virgin Radio. And then went to Absolute Radio. Before that, I did 5 years on XFM in London. Then I was up at Juice in Liverpool. And then I started a radio station down in Bournemouth. So I've actually been doing breakfast radio for 20 years. Yes, I am that fucking tired. So I really should have some stuff to share with you. I don't know if I have, but I wasn't going to share it anyway. But it says a lot for my relationship with Paul, is that actually he's okay with me coming on here, because last month it was a shock to Paul as I announced that I wanted to leave the station and the show, despite I was very, very happy there. And I always thought if I was lucky enough, because it only ever when you do my job and you're a breakfast show presenter, it only ends two ways. Either they say, you're done, get out, or you say, I'd like to leave. And actually, I've been really lucky. Every radio station I've worked for, everything I've achieved because I've somehow surrounded myself with like-minded people who've given me the freedom to grow, make mistakes. And essentially, if I could sum up, especially the last 10 years of my radio career, I've been allowed to evolve in public, evolve and get better in front of people's ears and their eyes. And actually in radio, we're not very good at nurturing talent. You want pre-formed talent that's got a proven track record. We're getting very, very, I think radio's getting quite bad at actually discovering raw new talent. I was very, very raw when I started, and I didn't have any previous radio experience, and you don't get a lot of that happening these days. But I've been very, very lucky to learn a lot of my lessons in front of people's ears every morning and grow over the last sort of 10 years. I think that's when I've really learned the most. But I'm leaving. I'm actually going to do, I always thought if I was ever going to leave Absolute, it would need to be something which really, really excited me. And there are lots of exciting opportunities in British radio, but nothing really, it still felt like a bit of a sideways move. And then I was asked if I fancied emigrating to Australia and becoming the first British person to host a breakfast show in Australia. And so at some point later on this year, still to be discussed with Paul, I'll be emigrating with my family. My 13-year-old daughter said to me, Dad, is this what's called a midlife crisis? If it is, it's a fucking stupid one. Paul said, if it is a midlife crisis, we will buy you a PA to have an affair with. I am going to be going to Australia. And so what I thought I'd do then, what I'm going to share with you, and then I'm happy to take any questions you've got, is I've got, in my last 12 years of breakfast radio on national radio, and to survive that at times has been like swimming with sharks. I've got 12 things I've learned from the last 12 years. The first thing for me is always make sure that you are recording that interview. I'm sure every single person who's worked in radio for a while, you've all got that one story about that amazing interview and it didn't record. And you never do an interview that doesn't record, or there's some kind of error with it, where it's someone really boring, where it actually would do you a favor if that didn't tape. It's always an amazing interview. I've interviewed lots of people, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I went to interview Ricky Gervais. And I've known Ricky for quite a few years, but this is quite a different kind of interview. And he said he'd give me half an hour. We were talking for an hour and a half. Midway through it, Ricky started to tell me a story about his upbringing. And he actually started to cry. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. I've never seen Ricky Gervais cry like this. This is going to win me awards. This is going to be amazing. And then when I'm getting out there, I'm thinking, my head's spinning, and Ricky said, that I've just done my favourite ever interview with you. And in fact, my partner Jane, who I've been with for 20 years, she doesn't know that story about the tennis racket that my mum saved up to buy me for 6 months. And when I got it one Christmas day when I was 11 years of age, in my little council house bedroom, I slept with it in my bed for 5 days. It meant that much. I'm thinking, this is it. I am a made man. Then I went back to the radio station, and there was no audio wave, nothing. It's literally like a doot, flatlining. Like, oh my God, that icy feeling where you just know, even though you start checking. So there were 2 microphones. Everything I said, recorded. Everything Ricky said, nothing. You could hear me, nothing. No tears, nothing. You know when you kept playing it, forward winding it, playing it, and you're like, oh my God. So the greatest interview I ever did, the world has never heard. Ricky offered to pay his own money. It took me a couple of days to tell Ricky that I'd cocked it up. And he's not someone who suffers fools gladly. This happened 5 years ago. Whenever I interview Ricky, he always goes, is this actually going to record this one? So please make sure that interview is recording. The other thing is, I think this is really, really important. I think if you're going to be on air and you're doing a personality radio show, you absolutely have to commit to seeing yourself as work in progress. I'm still learning, and when I go to Australia, despite 20 years of breakfast show experience, it's going to be like starting again. I've got so much to learn. I've also got a lot of experience in how I approach radio, but when I get out there, that is a very different marketplace that I'm going to have to learn a lot of very quick, raw lessons from. And so if you see yourself as work in progress, when you make mistakes, and you need to commit to making mistakes, because that's how we learn, but if you see yourself as work in progress, you're constantly looking to evolve. And sometimes in radio, we're not very good at learning. Radio kind of like, especially in breakfast radio, you kind of have this format, you talk between the songs, and there are certain things you do and don't do, and it's kind of handed down to you, and you carry on without really questioning it and thinking, could we do it slightly differently? And some program directors aren't very good at encouraging talent to try and make the show work for them, rather than trying to just fit them into how the marketplace sounds, try and let them stand out, whereas I've always tried to see myself as work in progress, so that way I'm constantly trying to learn and get better. And that way, I think if you're evolving, along with your audience, the way that they enjoy the show is different as well, because you can be surprising them and you're getting better. It's like a relationship. I've been with someone for 12 years on that station. I don't want them to ever feel like that when they turn the show on, they roughly know what I'm going to say, or they know all my special moves. That sounded quite creepy. I'm never going to say that again. Also, the other thing is, I think it's important to do is to learn from other areas. I know that you've got various speakers today and tomorrow from all different avenues, which is a great idea. I've always tried to learn from how different people do it. On breakfast shows, Paul and I have always seen when we're hiring new people, sometimes it's like doing what I do, it's like an arranged marriage. They just literally chuck you in a studio and go, get the fuck on with it, make radio. We've always tried, when we're looking for someone new on the road, on the show, we recently hired a news reporter and a sports reporter at the same time. We kind of literally thought about who did we want, what kind of characteristics do we want in those 2 different roles. And so we had a kind of like, it was like casting on a sitcom. On a sitcom, they don't just have funny people, they're all defined really well. If you Google, there's a 1-page document that the Friends creators and writers did before they ever wrote any of the episodes. It's a 1-page document with all the kind of character thumbnails of all the main characters on that show. If you can't do that for your breakfast show and know what all the positive and negative traits are, then you don't have a breakfast show. It's not properly defined. Everyone needs to know what their role is. There needs to be some kind of flexibility and movement within those roles, but they need to be defined, because if you can't define them, your audience won't either, and you're interchangeable. There's nothing unique, there's nothing distinctive about your show. And everything that Paul's worked really hard to do on that radio station, that has come from him having a clear idea and being able to articulate it to all the presenters and all the producers, is having a strategy and actually having a blueprint. And I think the most important thing for breakfast shows is, it's a very hazy blueprint for me every morning. We do have a running order, but my favorite show is when that running order goes out the window and it goes somewhere else. A couple of weeks ago, we were doing that day's breakfast show, and one of our listeners just randomly texted in that he once saw Robert Plant from Led Zepp in a blue Renault Megane. And I think, what is one of the richest rock stars in the world doing, driving around in a knackered old blue Renault Megane? I tried to move on with what we were doing on that day's show, and then suddenly other people started texting going, yeah, I live near Robert Plant. He does drive around in a... And I kept saying, please, I'm trying to do today's show. Can we just move on from the Robert Plant sightings in a Renault blue Megane? And then other people start texting and going, I've seen him. He shops in my local Sainsbury's. He's always in a Renault blue Megane. And this guy calls in going, the last time I saw him in my local Sainsbury's in Wolverhampton, Robert Plant was, they have the magazines in supermarkets, and sometimes they have those like classic rock magazines, don't they? Robert Plant was reading a Led Zepp special edition. looking at photos of himself. And then someone rang in who used to be a drummer with Robert Plant for 12 years to verify that he did own a blue Renault Megane. So those are my favourite shows when it goes all over the place. However, my original point is that, what was my original point? Yes, that's right. Learn from other places. So I remember years ago, I had a program director when I was working up in Liverpool, a fantastic guy that I worked with called Giles Squire. And one day, he sat me down for one of those dreaded air checks, and he said, "What was today's show?" And I did that classic excuse that lazy presenters like me say, "Here we go, it's a very quiet news day." And he said, I didn't hire you to do a topical news show. He said, there's material everywhere. You can find material anywhere in the world. And he taught me this trick I still use to this day sometimes. He told me to go through the letters page of newspapers, because sometimes you get these really weird letters in there. They're just nonsense. I don't know why someone would spend that much time writing about whose responsibility it is to leave. You know that next customer please sign in supermarkets? You know, when you don't know, is it your responsibility to put that down for the next person, or is that their responsibility? I got 4 hours out of that once, all right, from the Daily Star. So he taught me that material is everywhere. You don't have to give excuses like it was a quiet news thing today. And the other thing that I think is really important to me, and it has been for what Paul's trying to encourage me to do, Paul came from a talk radio background. Paul used to work at LBC. So over the last couple of years, one thing I really struggled with at times, I felt very safe doing the breakfast show when I was trying to make people laugh, but then sometimes trying to be authentic and speak from the heart made me feel a bit uncomfortable. And over the last couple of years, because actually the world has changed, and sadly, in the last couple of years, my job has changed in that you have to wake people up with really, really tragic news. And like last year, when we did focus groups about what the listeners remembered, of everything we tried to do all the stuff last year, you tried really hard to come up with creative ideas. And Paul said the number one thing they remembered from the show last year was the show when they woke up Monday morning to hear about the Manchester bombings at the Ariana Grande concert. I found that a really hard show to do. And I think years ago, I would have just said something quickly off the back of the news to say how awful it was, and we'll think about those affected. But because of what Paul encouraged me to do, to try and move towards those moments and being real and authentic. And authentic is a real buzzword. It's a real buzzword at the moment because we are actually, in an inauthentic world, we are searching for people on the radio to be leaders. And everything Paul talked about radio, I think radio is more alive as a medium now than it has been for a very, very long time. I know we live in a very, very fragmented media when there's so much competition, but actually what radio does still do, and it's kind of the original social media to me, it brings people together. It gives them a touch point for them to connect with each other. And we really want that. We still want filters. There's so much choice out there. There's too much choice. People still want to turn their radio on in the morning, whether it's listening to me or Chris Evans or Classic FM, and they want someone to try and just stop it for a moment and filter everything down. But after the Manchester bombings in the morning, I just said how I wasn't sure what kind of radio show they wanted from me that day. And Paul and I spoke the night before, and I said that to him. I said, I don't really know how to do that show. And Paul said, just say that. So what did I said? I said how I actually felt. I wasn't trying to read from a script. I just said, genuinely right now, I don't actually want to be on air. I'd rather be at home, lock the front door, and be with my kids. It's this terrifying news. It's the worst possible news. You know, in terrorist attacks, you don't really think about children being targets. And so we started just talking about that. I didn't know where it was going to go, which sometimes for breakfast show presenters, when you're trained that old school way of how you need to know what your out is so you can say the station identity. I didn't have any of that. I pushed myself out of a comfort zone and into a different area. And it's kind of like been a really big learning curve for me that actually there are lots of radio shows who are trying to be smart in the morning, but having heart and being genuine and being authentic is actually, I think, and it's taken me a long, long time to really learn this, I think is the most important thing you can have as a breakfast show right now. Everyone's trying to make you laugh. Everyone's got different creative ideas. But what's really unique to you is when you can actually stop the kind of the noise of what you're trying to do and actually speak honestly and openly to people. In the late night landscape in America, you see this a lot now with Jimmy Kimmel, who's now become this kind of spokesperson of a generation. And I think at the moment, you still want people to make you laugh in the morning. I don't want to give you the idea that I'm suddenly now some kind of Tony Robbins of breakfast radio. That's not the case. The other day, this will give you an idea of the radio I still do. My favourite radio to do is when something happens in real life and I go on air and talk about it. The other day I was coming back from a week abroad, and on those EasyJet flights, you're just crammed into tiny seats, aren't you? It's not even a seat, really. You're kind of folded in. And when I sneeze, some people can sneeze very politely, and you don't even know they sneeze. They just go, sorry, I just sneezed. You wouldn't know. When I sneeze, it's like an explosion, okay? There was no build-up, and I just sneezed, and the woman next to me wiped her forehead. You can't apologize enough in that moment. And there's actually nothing you say that can make that okay. And I was so horrified, right? And some of it, she was watching Broadchurch on her laptop. Some of it had gone on the screen as well. I said, this is just awful. We've got another hour and a half of this flight. She's cleaning that down, and I get my hand sanitizer out and go, does this help? She's like, no, it's okay. It's fine. So anyway, my wife says, you shouldn't talk about this on the radio. It's disgusting. I go on the radio the next day and talk about it, and we get an amazing hour of radio about when you've spilt fluids on a stranger. Let me just qualify that. I don't mean in a Bill Clinton way, okay? I mean drinks and stuff like that, and people sneezing on stuff. So we got this amazing stories out of something horrific where if my listeners will listen to that, that isn't hopefully a story that you'd normally get up and down the dial of someone, the host, sneezing on a stranger. I like doing those kind of stories that almost make you feel a bit embarrassed that you shouldn't be sharing it with 2 million people. Those, I think, often are the best moments because we all have those horrendous, awkward moments in real life. And I think sometimes that's what connects you to people, are telling those stories that you're actually partly embarrassed about. This was really tested to the max last year. I can't drink coffee. For someone that gets up at 4:30 in the morning, that's quite tough. But about 2 years ago, I had my first cup of coffee. I'd never had it before in my life, and it was an epiphany. It was like, oh, this is amazing. This is going to transform my energy levels. I didn't know that coffee, you're not really meant to have 12 to 14 cups a day. So I had to go to the doctor. I was suddenly having heart palpitations. And he said, like they always do, any change in diet? And I went, no. Any extra stress? I went, no, not really. So, what, anything else going on? I went, I've just discovered coffee. And he went, right, how much do you drink? I went, 10 to sort of 14 cups a day. He went, yeah, don't have any more caffeine. You just need to stop. And so I did. I never had any more caffeine. Then last year, I went to talk to about 25 schools. I was promoting my first kids book called Radio Boy. And I was at school. It was a Friday, and I was really, really tired. And the lady came up to me and said, can I get you anything before you go on stage? And I went, I don't know what possessed me. I went, can I have a coffee? Now, if you haven't had coffee for 2 years, I don't know how any of you have ever experienced this. It sometimes, for some people, can have a very strong, violent reaction. Yeah. I had the coffee, and then the lady goes, they're ready for you now. I had to go on stage at a little theatre. 5 schools had all come to this theatre, 11:30 on a Friday morning. I go and start chatting to them, and suddenly there's this awful, terrible feeling in my stomach. I move, and I thought I needed just to break wind, and if I just walked across the stage, the kids won't know about it. It's absolutely fine. However, sometimes, as Billy Connolly said, you must never trust a fart. I'm afraid to say I shat myself. Then I literally had this horrible, this ice feeling in my blood, like, oh my God. I'm looking at these kids, I'm looking at the clock thinking, I've got another 15 minutes to do. I'm having a panic attack up there, and I actually just freeze for about 10 seconds. What am I going to do? I can't say I need to go off stage. I've soiled myself. They're going to go, what is it with these DJs? They're just falling apart. So I had to carry on. And then I go to the woman afterwards, I need to go to the toilet now. She goes, no. The kids, they want to get the books signed right now. They bought 200 copies. Their minibuses are waiting to take them. You need to sit down and sign the books. So I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. I had to sit in my squishy pants like this. And these poor kids, none of them said what's that. Anyway, I was so embarrassed, obviously, about this. I came home, my wife and the kids, they weren't home, luckily. It wasn't until about Sunday night, I was just chatting to my wife, and I went, listen, I've got to share this with you. I told my wife, and yet again she said, I hope you're not thinking about talking about that on the radio. So I went on air the next day, Monday morning. I went, something terrible happened to me Friday, and I don't know whether I should talk about it or share this. This might be a story too far. And so we were debating it, and no one on the team, they kept saying, well, I'm sure you know, most stories you've told. I went, no, my wife has told me not to talk about this story. So after about 2 hours debating it or not that, I said, listen, after 8 o'clock, you've got two choices. Don't listen to me, and we'll be fine. But if you do stay with the show, know that everything you've ever thought about me is going to change. That is a decisive moment, because I've got a story and I'm doing it after 8:05, and it's horrific. My wife has told me not to do it, but I am going to do it. Then at 8:05, I shared the story, obviously cleaning up some of the language that we talked about. The listeners are horrified, absolutely horrified. However, we then got this huge sharing of stories. 99.9% of them were unbroadcastable, but sometimes they are the best stories. I remember once we were doing a phone-in last year about, have you ever had a foreign object stuck inside of you? Not the best idea. Had to cut that one short after a couple of minutes. Don't know what I was thinking of. And I've won awards for this shit. However, it was worth doing, because I got this email from this doctor who said, hi, I'm a doctor. I run a very large A&E department in central London. Don't want to come on air, but in the early hours of Sunday morning, a man was admitted to our hospital with not one, not two, not three, but 4 snooker balls up his backside. And he said, Christian, do you know what we did? We had a sweepstake as to what colour the first ball was that we pulled out of his backside. So yeah, my point was that content is everywhere. I often will use my personal life. I talk about that on the radio. That means I need to have a life. Having kids gives me so much material as well. Last year, my youngest daughter, Lois, who's 11, she came home and said, listen, we've got to do this project tonight about the Queen, and I need to find some interesting facts that people don't know about the Queen. I said, and I thought she got it as a joke, the Queen's had an operation, she can't break wind. I went away thinking, she knew Dad's joking. The next day, I got to pick her up from school. The teacher asked to speak to me. She goes, look, your daughter got in a bit of trouble today. She said that you told her, and there's this terrible gap. She goes, that the Queen couldn't fart. I obviously think Lois is making this up, and she was like trying to get out of trouble by blaming you. And I went, no, I told her that. And then we did the next day, we talked about lies your parents told you. So yeah, my point being is that basically content is everywhere if you are prepared to make a fool of yourself every day between 6 and 10. Right, I've got about 5 minutes left. Have any of you got any questions that you'd like to ask? I know some of you are on air, some of you are off air, but have any of you got any questions that you'd like to ask? Yes.
Inspirational talk. I just wanted to ask your advice about developing raw talent. You said earlier that there is a skill in nurturing new talent. We work at BBC Radio Ulster, and we're constantly encouraging young people to come into broadcasting. But from your point of view, Christian, what advice would you give?
I think because, you know what, my route to get into radio was quite different. When I was a teenager, I was kind of obsessed with Steve Wright in the Afternoon and stand-up comedy. I wanted to try and do one of those. And I found it quite hard to get into radio. And I ended up, on the advice of my wife, she said, why don't you take a job, I was working in sales. I hated it. She said, why don't you try getting a sales job at a radio station, getting that way? I said, they don't like salespeople, and they don't give them radio shows. She goes, well, at the moment, it's not happening for you. So I got in kind of that way. And there was a program director who took a chance on me. Bear in mind, I was selling sponsorship and promotions. I had no business being allowed to go and audition for a breakfast show. But what he just thought I was naturally funny, knew how to tell a story. I didn't have the basic skills, but I could learn those. I had something more important, which was a kind of, I guess, a really raw, and it was very, very raw, talent and natural aptitude for talking. And so I think sometimes looking outside alternative avenues, rather than people who are already doing radio, that might be doing stand-up or other areas like that, or writing, and trying to encourage them to come over. I think now it's quite an interesting time, because when kids ask me, how do I get on the radio? And I'm like, why aren't you uploading your own shows now? if I was a kid now, 11, 12, I'd be doing podcasting. It would have been terrible, but I would have started to build up my air miles and get my voice out there. So I think that's what we need to be doing, is encouraging those. The next generation of voices, I think, is going to be discovered online. Whether or not they want to come onto the radio, I don't know. Do they need someone's permission? But I think it's quite an interesting area how we encourage that and where we stimulate that and where we find it. I think you need to go into that area because that's where they all live now, whether you like it or not. But thank you very much for your question. Yes?
Hi, my name is Nessie from Spirit Radio.
There's no point getting that microphone there. You're too slow. Sorry, Nessie. She's halfway through the question, Nessie. Hello, Spirit Radio. Excuse me?
So say, for example, you're saying, okay, well, our audience, most of their children are younger and they're colleges and teenagers. How do you stay authentic while still kind of speaking to the realm that your audience is staying kind of one age, but you're changing?
Well, yeah, that's really hard because everything's moving so quickly. I guess by talking about that sometimes, and even just being aware of that. I think a comedian's job is to be aware. My job is to literally be aware of what's going on in my life, my reaction to it, even if I'm embarrassed about something, and then talk about that. That's what a comedian's job is to do, is to be aware, because so much of what we do in life is a load of automatic process, isn't it? You just kind of like stumble through your life sometimes. You're just so busy, you're just trying to get through the day. A comedian's job is to pause that and go, hang on a minute, have you noticed how we do that? So I think by articulating what's going on inside, I think that's how you stay relevant. And also, you need to be, I'm really good, people think I know a lot about a lot of things. I don't. I know a tiny amount about lots of different things. I read from cover to cover the week, and within about half an hour, I have a good overview of what's going on and stuff like that. So I think I read a lot. That's what, whether it's movies I'm never going to go and see, or TV shows I'm not going to go and see, just so I have a rough idea of what those moments are, what the TV shows that people like at the moment, or even what they hate, and find in those areas. So I think, you know what you need to do? This is it, I'm stumbled upon my answer here. You need to stay curious. Kids do this, kids ask loads of questions. Tea time for me, it's like being at a press conference, right? I get irritated with their constant questions. However, that's what kids have. They see the magic and wonder in the world. They want to know how something works. And after a while, we turn that off. We numb it down. So I think the most important thing for a radio presenter, if you're going to do personality radio, breakfast time, drive time at the weekends, late nights, is to be curious and to hang on to that childlike, playful quality where you still want to unpick stuff and ask, why does this work like that? But thanks for your question.
Christian.
Yes. Hello,
Hey,
sir.
Clint from Radio Nova. I used to work at the radio station you're going to work for in Australia. I'm just wondering, you talked about it there roughly about why you're doing it, but what are you most scared of about this new venture in your life?
Oh, this could take a while. All of it. I am genuinely frightened and excited and wildly from minute to minute. But it feels like I'm going to go over there and start again. And that is really, really exciting. And it feels like I'm burning everything to the ground over here, and that's terrifying. When I told Paul, because of the relationship we have, I said, look, I'm probably going to be doing this. Paul spent 2 hours doing a smear campaign against Australia. I tell you what, he should go and work for Donald Trump. I left our meeting, right, and I rang my wife and went, I don't know. I've just spoken to Paul. He says it's not a good idea. I'm like really thinking it over. My wife goes, because she's smarter than me, hang on a minute. Your boss, who doesn't want you to leave, said that it's not a good thing to go. What did you think he was going to say? So I'm frightened of, I've never been described as a foreigner in my life. So when I'm reading the newspaper articles, I feel like, I'm not a foreigner, I'm British. And I realize, no, I am. I'm a stranger out there, and how I integrate into there is going to be really challenging. But that also really, really excites me. So I guess the fear is having no listeners, getting sacked, having no friends. Why am I doing it? In fact, Paul, take me back. This has been really helpful. Did he ask you to ask that?
No. Genuine question. Good luck, though. Good luck.
Thank you very much. My time's up. Is my time up?
It is, yeah.
No. Is my time up?
Unfortunately.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.